The chandelier's crystal fragments caught the morning light, scattering rainbows across the mahogany table, where 12 men in tailored suits debated the fate of a billion-dollar empire. Maya Chen moved through the Peninsula Hotel's executive conference room like a shadow, silver coffee pot steady in her hands, eyes downcast in the way the training manual demanded. Section 47, Subsection C, a voice barked from the head of the table. Marcus Kellerman, lead attorney for Apex Capital, jabbed his Mont Blanc pen at the projection screen. The indemnity clause covers all pre-existing liabilities. Crystal clear. Maya refilled his cup. Steam rose between them. Her gaze flickered to the screen. Rows of legal text in Times New Roman, clause numbers running down the left margin like a spine. Something was wrong. The CFO from Datacore Industries leaned forward. "And you're certain this protects us from legacy debt transfers?" His voice carried the weight of careers ending or ascending on the answer. "Absolutely," Kellerman said. He didn't even glance at the contract. "Been doing this 20 years. This merger is bulletproof." Maya's hand tightened on the coffee pot handle. Section 47, subsection C was there. But subsection D wasn't. The Whitmore precedent required it. The automatic liability shield. Without it, every hidden debt from Datacore's past 17 acquisitions would cascade onto Apex's balance sheet the moment ink dried. She shouldn't speak. Training said never interrupt. The scar on her heart from 1,000 dismissals said, stay silent. But her daughter's face appeared in her mind. 7 years old, asking why Mama couldn't be a lawyer anymore. Maya set down the coffee pot. "Excuse me." The room's temperature dropped 10 degrees. 12 faces turned toward her, with varying expressions of confusion and irritation. Marcus Kellerman's eyebrows rose like a judge about to issue a contempt citation. "Did you need something?" His tone could cut glass. Maya's throat went dry. She pointed at the screen with a trembling finger. Section 47 is incomplete. Subsection D is missing, the contingent liability severance clause, under Whitmore v. Datacore Industries. Without that specific language, all legacy obligations transfer automatically to the acquiring entity upon merger finalization. Silence, then laughter. 6 hours earlier, Maya's alarm had screamed into the darkness of her studio apartment at 4:47 a.m. She silenced it before the sound could wake Zara, whose small body was curled beneath a quilt covered in stars. The same quilt Maya's mother had sewn before the cancer took her voice. Then her breath, then everything. The law books on Maya's nightstand gathered dust now, relics of a life that ended 3 years ago in Dean Morrison's office. "We're very sorry, Miss Chen, but without full-time enrollment, the scholarship is voided. Perhaps when your circumstances change, circumstances. Such a clean word for watching your mother die in installments while medical bills devoured your future." Maya showered in 4 minutes flat, a skill learned from double shifts. She pulled on the Peninsula's uniform, crisp white blouse, black pencil skirt, burgundy vest with gold piping that made her look like an expensive chess piece. In the mirror, she saw what the world saw. Not the woman who'd ranked second in her class at Columbia Law, not the student who'd memorized entire sections of the Uniform Commercial Code for fun. Just a waitress, invisible. She kissed Zara's forehead and left a note. "Cereal in the cabinet. Mrs. Park will walk you to school. Love you more than words. Mama." On the kitchen counter sat a mason jar labeled Zara's College Fund in her daughter's careful handwriting. $1,743. Maya added 2 20s from last night's tips. The Peninsula lobby smelled like imported lilies and old money. Maya clocked in at 6:02 a.m., tied her hair into a regulation bun, and reviewed the day's reservations. Executive Floor Conference Room C. Apex Capital Merger Finalization. 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. High profile. VIP service required. Her manager, Gerald, a thin man who wore his authority like cologne, appeared at her shoulder. "Chen, you're on the Apex meeting. Full service, coffee, water, lunch at noon. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not make eye contact. These men are closing a deal worth more than you'll make in 10 lifetimes." Maya nodded. She'd heard versions of this speech 100 times. What Gerald didn't know, Maya still read legal journals on her phone during breaks. She'd followed the Apex Data Core merger for months, a fascination she couldn't explain, like watching a train approach a washed-out bridge. She knew the players. She knew the stakes. She knew contract law the way musicians know scales. "Understood," she said. Gerald's eyes narrowed. "You've been distracted lately. If you need this job, act like it." Maya's smile was practiced, empty. "Yes, sir." Marcus Kellerman's laughter filled the conference room like poison gas. It started as a chuckle, then expanded into something cruel and theatrical. The other attorneys joined in, a chorus of disbelief and contempt. "Did she just," the CFO started, "try to explain contract law to us?" Kellerman finished. He stood all 6'3" of him, and approached Maya with the slow confidence of a predator who'd already won. "Sweetheart, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but the adults are talking." Maya's face burned. She forced herself to maintain eye contact. "I'm not trying to overstep. The Whitmore case from 2019, it established that without explicit contingent liability language in subsection D." "The Whitmore case?" Kellerman's voice dripped with mock fascination. He turned to his colleagues. "Gentlemen, our Waitress has been doing legal research." More laughter. "Tell me, did you get your law degree from Google University? Or was it YouTube?" A younger attorney with wire-rimmed glasses smirked. "Maybe she stayed at a Holiday Inn Express last night." The room erupted. Maya felt her hands ball into fists. Every dismissal she'd ever swallowed rose in her throat like bile. But she'd come this far. Her voice emerged steadier than she felt. "I attended Columbia Law for 2 years before—" "Before what?" Kellerman interrupted. "Before you realized you weren't cut out for it? Before you discovered pouring coffee was more your speed?" He leaned closer. She could smell his expensive cologne, see the gold cufflinks engraved with his initials. "Let me explain something about the real world. Contracts like this are reviewed by teams of experts. We've spent 6 months on this merger. And you think you found something we missed? In what, 30 seconds while refilling coffee?" His voice dropped to a whisper only she could hear. "Know your place." Maya's breath caught. Those 3 words, her stepfather's favorite phrase, delivered right before he'd remind her that girls from her neighborhood didn't become lawyers, they became mothers and mistakes. She stepped back. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have—" "No, you shouldn't have." Kellerman returned to his seat and gestured toward the door. "Gerald, your staff needs better training." Gerald appeared instantly, his face crimson with humiliation and rage. He gripped Maya's elbow. "Miss Chen, a word now." As she was escorted out, Maya looked back once. The contract glowed on the screen, missing the clause that would destroy everything. Marcus Kellerman was already moving to the next agenda item, his laughter fading into discussion of stock options and board appointments. The door closed. The lock clicked. Maya stood in the service corridor, surrounded by room service carts and folded linens. Gerald's voice was ice. "What the hell were you thinking?" "There's a missing clause." "I don't care if there's a missing page. You embarrassed this hotel in front of our most important clients. You're reassigned to banquet service, effective immediately. 1 more incident and you're gone. Understand?" Maya nodded. Her vision blurred. Gerald walked away. His footsteps echoed. She was alone. Maya made it to the staff bathroom before the tears came. She locked herself in the farthest stall and pressed her forehead against the cool metal door. Her hands shook so violently she had to clasp them together. "Know your place." The words echoed in her skull, spoken in Marcus Kellerman's voice, then her stepfather's, then Dean Morrison's, then every person who'd ever looked at her, and seen something less than human. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Somewhere in the building, a vacuum cleaner droned. Maya pulled out her phone with trembling fingers. She typed Whitmore vs. Data Core Industries into the search bar for the 100th time. The case summary appeared. A 2019 precedent where a tech merger collapsed because the acquiring company inherited $340 million in undisclosed liabilities. The judge's ruling was explicit. Without subsection D's contingent liability severance language, all debts transfer automatically. She'd memorized this case in Professor Reeves's Contracts 2 seminar. He'd spent 3 lectures dissecting it, calling it the most expensive missing comma in corporate history. Maya had written a 20-page analysis that earned the only A+ in the class. She still had it saved in her cloud drive, a ghost of competence from another lifetime. Her phone showed 10:47 a.m. In that conference room, they were probably signing preliminary documents now. The final signatures would come this afternoon. Once executed, the merger would be irreversible for 90 days. The standard regulatory review period, 90 days. Then DataCore's hidden obligations would surface like corpses in a lake, and Apex Capital would drown under debt nobody saw coming. Except her. The waitress. The dropout. The woman whose brilliance didn't count because it came with the wrong credentials. Maya dried her eyes with rough paper towels. Her reflection in the mirror looked like a stranger, face blotchy, mascara smudged. The burgundy vest suddenly feeling like a costume she'd never chosen to wear. Her mother's voice surfaced from memory, soft and weak from the hospital bed. "Maya, baby, listen to me. They'll never see what you see. You're too bright for them. It hurts their eyes. But you keep seeing anyway. Promise me." Maya had promised. Then her mother died. Then the scholarship died. Then the dream died. But the seeing never stopped. She straightened her vest, fixed her hair, and walked out of the bathroom. Her shift ended at 3 p.m. She had 4 hours to decide if silence was safety or cowardice. Columbia Law School 3 years ago. Maya could still feel the weight of the casebooks in her backpack, smell the old paper and leather in the library, hear Professor Reeves' voice filling the lecture hall with the kind of passion that made contract law sound like poetry. "Contracts are promises made visible," he'd said on the first day. "Every clause is a fortress against chaos. Miss one brick, and the whole structure collapses." Maya had sat in the front row, the only student taking notes by hand, because writing helped her remember. She'd grown up poor in Queens, raised by a single mother who cleaned houses and spoke English, with an accent that made people talk slower, louder, like volume could bridge understanding. Maya learned early that brilliance was her only currency. She'd worked 3 jobs to afford the LSAT prep course, scored 1 to 74, 99th percentile. Columbia offered a full scholarship. Her mother had cried, held Maya's face in both hands and whispered, "You're going to change everything." For 2 years she did. Top of her contracts class, law review candidate, summer associate position lined up at a white shoe firm. Then the diagnosis, stage 4 pancreatic cancer. 6 months, maybe 8. Her mother refused treatment she couldn't afford. Maya withdrew from school to become a full-time caregiver. The scholarship required continuous full-time enrollment. No exceptions. Not even for dying mothers. Dean Morrison had been kind but firm. "We have a waiting list of qualified candidates. Perhaps you could reapply when your circumstances stabilize." Circumstances. That word again. As if cancer was a scheduling conflict. Maya's mother lived 7 months. Long enough to lose her hair, her appetite, her ability to walk. Long enough to make Maya promise she'd go back to school. Short enough that Maya was holding her hand when the monitors went flat and the world became a place without the only person who'd ever believed in her completely. Zara was born 5 months later, a surprise from a relationship that didn't survive grief. Maya was 22 alone, and so far in debt that breathing felt expensive. The law firm stopped returning her calls. The scholarship was gone. Columbia was a memory, so she became a waitress. Not because she lacked intelligence, but because intelligence doesn't pay for diapers or rent, or the pediatrician when your daughter has an ear infection and screams through the night. But she kept reading. Late at night after Zara slept, Maya would pull up legal journals on her phone. She followed Supreme Court cases like some people followed sports. She could recite the elements of contract formation the way others recited song lyrics. The knowledge stayed sharp even as the opportunity dulled. Professor Reeves had written her once, after she'd stopped responding to emails, "Maya, brilliance doesn't have an expiration date. When you're ready, the law will still be here waiting." She'd never written back. What could she say? That she was ready, but the law wasn't waiting? That doors didn't reopen for women who'd stumbled once? Now standing in the Peninsula's service corridor, with a coffee-stained apron and the echo of Marcus Kellerman's laughter in her ears, Maya wondered if Reeves had been wrong. Maybe brilliance did expire. Maybe hers had died in that hospital room, or Dean Morrison's office, or this morning when she'd dared to speak and been laughed out of a room full of men who'd never had to choose between their dreams and their mother's last breaths, the banquet hall. Assignment sheet showed her name in Gerald's angry handwriting. She had 3 hours until the merger signatures were final. 3 hours to decide who she was. Maya's phone glowed in the storage closet where she'd hidden during her break. The Wi-Fi signal was weak but functional. She pulled up the Datacore Industries acquisition history, fingers flying across the cracked screen. The company had grown through 17 mergers in the past decade. Each acquisition was listed with dates, values, and closing details. Maya cross-referenced them with public SEC filings, a skill she'd learned for a securities regulation, course she'd never finished, there buried, in a footnote from the 2018 acquisition of Tech Ventures Global. Pending litigation and contingent obligations remain under seller retention per negotiated terms. That debt hadn't been resolved. It had been deferred. And without subsection D's severance language, it would transfer to Apex Capital the moment this merger closed. Maya's heart hammered. She dug deeper. The Tech Ventures litigation involved patent infringement, a case that had been quietly settled for an undisclosed amount. But the settlement agreement included a clause she recognized from Professor Reeves's lectures, a sleeping liability trigger. If Tech Ventures, now Datacore, merged with another entity, the settlement payments would triple automatically. She found another. The 2020 acquisition of DataStream Solutions included environmental remediation obligations from a contaminated facility in New Jersey. Cost estimate $180 million. Status: deferred pending federal EPA review. The review was scheduled for next month. There were more. Employee pension shortfalls, warranty claims from defective hardware batches, tax disputes in 3 states, each one a ticking bomb, all of them primed to explode the moment Apex became the legal parent entity. Maya calculated quickly. Conservative estimate, $1.2 billion in hidden obligations. Worst case, closer to $2 billion. Apex Capital's market capitalization was $8 billion. This would wipe out a quarter of the company's value overnight. Stock would crater. 3,000 employees would face layoffs. Retirement accounts would evaporate. And it was all preventable. One clause. 37 words. Professor Reeves had made them memorize it. Notwithstanding any provision herein, seller retains all contingent liabilities, obligations, and claims arising from operations or entities acquired prior to the effective date, and such obligations shall not transfer to buyer under any circumstances. Without those words, the Whitmore precedent applied automatically. It was settled law, inarguable. Any first-year law student would know it, but Marcus Kellerman hadn't known it, or hadn't checked, or assumed it didn't matter because he'd been doing this 20 years and a waitress couldn't possibly be right. Maya's hands were steady now. The fear had burned away, replaced by something colder and clearer. She took screenshots of every document. She downloaded the Whitmore decision. She prepared a timeline showing exactly when each liability would surface. Then she Googled Apex Capital's legal department. The general counsel was a woman named Patricia Huang, Columbia Law class of 2003, which meant she'd been a student when Reeves was a visiting professor. Maybe she'd remember him. Maybe that would matter. Maya's shift ended in 2 hours. The merger would be signed in 3. She composed an email with shaking fingers, attaching every document, explaining the situation in language that was precise, professional, and desperate. She hit send. The email bounced back immediately, mailbox full, message undeliverable. Maya tried the CFO, bounced. The COO bounced. Every executive email she could find was either inactive or blocked from external messages. Of course, billion-dollar companies didn't accept unsolicited emails from random addresses. She called the main switchboard. "I need to speak to Patricia Huang, it's urgent, regarding the DataCore merger." The receptionist's voice was bored. "Ms. Huang is in meetings all day. I can take a message. This can't wait. There's a critical error in the merger contract. Section 47 is missing. Ma'am, I'm not authorized to interrupt executive meetings. I can transfer you to general inquiries. Please, just—" The line went silent. Then Muzak. Maya waited 3 minutes before hanging up. She tried calling the peninsula's executive floor, thinking maybe she could get a message to someone in that conference room. The hotel operator recognized her voice. "Ms. Chen, you've been instructed not to contact guests in the executive wing. I'll have to report this call." Maya's chest tightened. She was running out of options and time. The truth sat in her phone like plutonium, valuable and deadly and completely useless if no one would touch it. She thought of Zara, of the college fund, of the future that was already so fragile it could shatter from a whisper. Then she thought of 3,000 people losing their jobs because she'd stayed silent, of families destroyed by a missing clause she'd seen and done nothing about. Maya closed her eyes. Professor Reeves's voice. "The law doesn't care about your credentials. It cares about what's right. And sometimes Ms. Chen being right means being alone." She made a decision. The peninsula's legal counsel, Richard Voss, worked in a windowless office on the 3rd floor. Maya found him at 2:37 p.m., 3 minutes before the merger was scheduled to execute. He looked up from his computer with the irritation of a man interrupted during important work. "Can I help you?" His tone suggested the answer he wanted was no. Maya spoke fast. "My name is Maya Chen. I'm on staff here. I need 5 minutes of your time. There's a critical error in the Apex DataCore merger contract being signed upstairs right now." Voss leaned back in his chair. "Ms. Chen, I appreciate your concern, but I'm not sure what you expect me to—" Section 47 is missing subsection D, the contingent liability severance clause. Under Whitmore vs. DataCore Industries, without that language, all legacy obligations transfer automatically. I estimate $1.2 billion in hidden debt will hit Apex within 90 days. Silence. Voss's expression shifted from irritation to something harder to read. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Sit," Maya sat. Her heart hammered so hard she could see her blouse moving. Voss opened his laptop. "Walk me through it." She did. Clause by clause, document by document. She showed him the screenshots, the timeline, the precedent. She explained the sleeping liability triggers, the environmental obligations, the patent settlement structure. Her voice was steady, clinical, the way Professor Reeves had taught her to present arguments. When she finished, Voss was quiet for 30 seconds. He reviewed her documents, checked the Whitmore case, pulled up the merger contract on his screen. "This is thorough," he said finally. His voice had softened. "Where did you say you went to school?" "Columbia Law. 2 years before I had to withdraw." Voss nodded slowly. "And you saw this how?" "I was serving coffee in the meeting. The contract was on the screen, and you remembered all of this from—" Contracts 2 with Professor David Reeves. Spring 2022. He spent 3 weeks on Whitmore. It settled precedent. Voss studied her face. For a moment, Maya thought she saw something like belief in his eyes. He picked up his phone. "Let me make a call," he said. Hope bloomed in Maya's chest, fragile, dangerous hope. She watched Voss dial. Watched him speak in low tones to someone on the other end. Watched his expression change from serious to apologetic. He hung up. The look he gave her was almost pitying. "Ms. Chen, I spoke with Patricia Huang's office. They've reviewed the contract extensively, with 3 separate law firms. The merger has been vetted by some of the best legal minds in the country." He paused. "These men are experts. They've spent months. They missed it. Or," Voss said gently, "you're mistaken. Respectfully, you haven't practiced law. You took 2 years of courses. These are partners at top-tier firms with decades of experience. The likelihood that you spotted something they all missed." He didn't finish. He didn't have to. Maya felt the hope crumble. "So you won't call them? Won't stop the signing? I can't stop a billion-dollar merger based on this." He gestured vaguely at her phone, her screenshots, her urgency. "If you're right, and I'm not saying you are, it'll come out in regulatory review. These things have safeguards. Regulatory review takes 90 days. By then the lawyers will handle it." Voss stood. He walked around the desk and placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture that was meant to be kind but felt like burial. "You clearly care about this. That's admirable. But sometimes we have to trust that the people in charge know what they're doing." Maya stood. Her legs felt numb. "And if they don't?" Voss smiled sadly. "Then they'll learn an expensive lesson. But that's not your responsibility. You're a waitress, not a lawyer." The words landed like bullets. "Not cruel. Just factual. Just true in the way the world measured truth." "Gerald told me you've been struggling lately," Voss continued. "Maybe take some time. Focus on your job. Leave the legal work to the professionals." He opened the door. The conversation was over. Maya walked out. The hallway was empty. Somewhere above her in that conference room, pens were touching paper. Signatures were appearing. A mistake was becoming permanent. She checked her phone, 2:54 p.m., 6 minutes left. Maya ran. Through the service corridors, past startled housekeepers toward the executive elevator. Her hand hit the call button over and over. The elevator was on the 14th floor. Too slow. She took the stairs. Her shoes slipped on polished marble. By the time she reached the 9th floor, her lungs burned and her vision swam. The executive conference room was at the end of the hall, behind double doors where a security guard stood like a wall. "Ma'am, this floor is restricted." Maya gasped for air. "I need to get to the Apex meeting." "It's urgent. No one interrupts that meeting. Turn around. Please just tell them." The guard's hand moved to his radio. "Sir, I need assistance on 9. Maya's phone buzzed. A news alert. Her screen showed a Bloomberg headline. "Apex Capital finalizes 4.2B data core acquisition." The timestamp was 2:59 p.m. She was too late. Gerald appeared with another security guard. His face was purple with rage. "Chen, what the hell are you doing up here?" "The merger, there's a mistake. Get her out of this building now." The guards took her arms, not rough but firm. They escorted her to the elevator, down to the lobby, through the employee exit into the alley where the dumpsters lived, and the city smelled like rain and garbage. Gerald followed. "You're done. Clear out your locker. You're fired." "But no more. Whatever is going on with you, get help. But do it somewhere else." The door slammed. The lock engaged. Maya stood in the alley. Her phone buzzed again, another news alert. The markets were celebrating. Apex Capital's stock jumped 7% on merger news. Marcus Kellerman was quoted. "This acquisition positions Apex as a dominant force in enterprise software for the next decade." Maya's hands shook. She scrolled through her contacts. Professor Reeves's email was still there, 3 years dormant. She deleted his number. but kept the email like a talisman of a life that used to be hers. She opened a new message, typed, "Professor Reeves, it's Maya Chen from your Contracts 2 class. I need help. There's a merger that—" Her finger hovered over send. What was the point? He probably didn't remember her. And even if he did, what could he do? The contract was signed. The deal was done. She deleted the message, put her phone away, started walking toward the subway, then her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Hello? Maya Chen? A woman's voice, professional. This is Patricia Huang from Apex Capital. I just received a very strange message from our regulatory compliance officer. Something about a missing clause? Maya stopped walking. Yes, Section 47, subsection D. The contingent liability. I know what subsection D is. Where are you right now? Outside the peninsula. I was just fired for stay there. I'm sending a car. The line went dead. Maya stood on the sidewalk as rain began to fall. Briefcases and umbrellas rushed past her. The city hummed with its million indifferent stories. Her phone screen showed 3:17 p.m. A black Mercedes pulled up. The window descended. A driver in a suit looked at her. Ms. Chen? Maya got in. The car pulled into traffic. She had no idea where she was going. No idea if this was real or some elaborate way to threaten her with a lawsuit for defamation. No idea if speaking truth to power was brave or just a new way to destroy what little stability she'd managed to build. But she thought of her daughter and her mother. And Professor Reeves's voice in her head, being right means being alone. The car headed toward Apex Capital's headquarters in Midtown. Rain streaked the windows. Maya closed her eyes. That night, at home in her apartment, she helped Zara with math homework, fractions. Her daughter struggled with the concept of parts and wholes. Mama, why are some parts bigger than others if they're all the same? Maya thought about conference rooms and service corridors, about the parts of her life that had value and the parts that didn't, about who decided which was which. Because context matters, baby. A half can be everything or nothing depending on what you're measuring. After Zara fell asleep, Maya sat by the window. Her phone showed 17 missed calls from numbers she didn't recognize. Gerald had texted, "Legal wants to talk to you." Call immediately. She didn't call. She opened her laptop instead and pulled up her old Contracts 2 paper on the Whitmore case. The A+ still glowed at the top in Professor Reeves's handwriting. Below it, his note, "This is lawyer-level work, Ms. Chen. Don't ever forget that." She'd forgotten. For 3 years, she'd forgotten. Maya looked at the college fund jar, at her daughter's sleeping face, at the law books gathering dust. Tomorrow, she'd find out if telling the truth had saved 3,000 jobs, or just cost her the only one she had. Tomorrow, she'd learn if brilliance without credentials was enough, or if the world only valued knowledge when it came with the right diplomas and the right last names. Tonight, she was just a mother in a studio apartment, watching rain trace patterns on glass. Her phone buzzed one more time. A text from an unknown number. "Professor Reeves gave me your contact. I'm the independent regulatory reviewer for the Apex Data Core merger. We need to talk. Tomorrow, 8 a.m., Federal Building. Don't be late. James Whitmore." Maya's breath stopped. Whitmore. As in Whitmore versus Data Core Industries. The case, the precedent. The man whose name she'd spoken in that conference room. She read the message 3 times. Then she looked at her daughter and whispered, "Mama might have saved some people today." Zara didn't hear. She slept with the peace of children who still believed their mothers could do anything. Maya hoped she was right. Maya didn't sleep. She sat at her kitchen table watching the clock numbers change, while Zara's breathing filled the silence. 3:17 a.m., 4:42 a.m., 5:56 a.m. Each minute felt like evidence of her own foolishness. The text from James Whitmore glowed on her phone screen. She'd Googled him at midnight. Federal Regulatory Reviewer, former appellate judge, the man who'd written the 2019 decision that created the precedent she'd staked everything on. He wanted to meet at 8 a.m., but what if she was wrong? What if Marcus Kellerman and his army of lawyers were right, and she was just a dropout waitress who'd mistaken confidence for competence? Maya pulled up the contract one more time. Studied section 47 until the words blurred. Subsection C was there. Subsection D was not. The Whitmore precedent was clear. She wasn't wrong. But being right and being believed were different countries with no bridge between them. Her phone showed 6 missed calls from Gerald. 3 from unknown numbers. 2 emails from addresses she didn't recognize. She opened none of them. The college fund jar sat on the counter, $1,763 that was supposed to buy Zara's future. Now it might need to buy groceries, while Maya searched for another job that would ignore her brilliance and pay her for obedience. She thought about her mother's hospital room. The machines beeping their mechanical countdown. The choice she'd made to hold her mother's hand instead of holding her place at Columbia Law. Everyone said she'd made the right choice. No one mentioned it was also the choice that ended her. The apartment was too quiet. Maya walked to the window. Manhattan was waking up. Delivery trucks, early commuters. The city's great machine grinding forward, whether she was part of it or crushed beneath it. Her reflection in the glass looked hollow. The woman who'd stood in that conference room and spoken truth felt like someone else. Someone brave. Someone who didn't have a 7-year-old daughter and rent due in 12 days. Zara stirred in her sleep. "Mama?" Maya went to her, smoothed her hair. "I'm here, baby." "Bad dream?" "No, sweetie." "Mama just couldn't sleep." Zara's eyes fluttered open. "Because of the sad thing?" Children saw too much. Maya forced a smile. "Because Mama has an important meeting today." "The one that makes you scared?" Maya's throat tightened. "How did you know I was scared?" "Your hands shake when you're scared, like when we see police." Zara took her mother's hand. "But you're the bravest person I know." Maya stood outside the federal building at 7:34 a.m., wearing the only professional outfit she owned, a charcoal suit she'd bought for law school interviews. It fit differently now, tighter in some places, loose in others. The fabric remembered the woman she used to be. She'd used her last $40 on a professional blowout and cab fare. Zara was with Mrs. Park. Maya had 37 cents left in her checking account and everything riding on the next hour. The building's glass doors reflected a version of herself that looked almost convincing. Almost like a lawyer. She practiced breathing. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. At 7:51, a woman in an emerald green suit emerged from a black sedan. Patricia Huang. Maya recognized her from the Apex Capital website. She walked with the stride of someone who'd never been told to know her place. Their eyes met. Huang approached. "Maya Chen." "Yes, ma'am." "You're early, good." Huang gestured toward the building. "Whitmore is waiting." "And he's not patient." They rode the elevator in silence. Huang studied Maya with the intensity of someone reading contract fine print. "Columbia Law," Reeves said. 2 years. You spoke to Professor Reeves. Called him at midnight. Woke him up. He spoke about you for 20 minutes. Huang's expression softened slightly. Said you were the best student he'd taught in 15 years. Said you had a photographic memory for case law. Maya's chest tightened. He remembered me? He said you disappeared. Stopped answering emails. He thought... Huang paused. He thought the law had lost someone important. The elevator doors opened. A receptionist led them down a corridor to a conference room, where a man in his 60s sat reviewing documents. James Whitmore. Silver hair, wire-rimmed glasses, eyes that missed nothing. He looked up. "Miss Chen, sit." Maya sat. Huang sat beside her. Whitmore slid a document across the table. The Apex Data Core merger contract, printed and annotated in red ink. "Section 47, he said. "Walk me through it." Maya's hands were steady now. She explained the missing subsection, the contingent liability issue, the 17 data core acquisitions with deferred obligations. The sleeping liability triggers, the Whitmore precedent itself. When she finished, Whitmore leaned back. "You saw this while serving coffee?" "Yes, sir." "And you remember the precedent well enough to cite it from memory?" "I wrote a 20-page analysis of your decision for Contracts 2, Spring 2022. I can recite the holding if—" "No need." Whitmore looked at Huang. "She's right. Section 47 is fatally defective. Without subsection D, Apex inherits every liability Data Corps has been deferring for a decade." Huang's face went pale. "Jesus Christ. How much are we talking about?" Whitmore asked Maya. Maya pulled out her phone, showed them her calculations. Conservative estimate, $1.2 billion. Worst case, $1.8 billion. The environmental obligations alone are— "I've seen enough." Whitmore stood. "I'm calling an emergency regulatory hearing. The merger approval is suspended pending review." Huang pulled out her phone. "I need to call our board. Marcus Kellerman swore the contract was bulletproof." "Marcus Kellerman," Whitmore said coldly, "is about to learn an expensive lesson about arrogance." The emergency hearing convened at 10 a.m. in a federal conference room with mahogany walls, and the seal of the Securities and Exchange Commission hanging like a judge. Maya sat at a table with Huang and Whitmore. Across from them, Marcus Kellerman. 3 partners from his firm, Data Corps' CEO, and a phalanx of lawyers who looked like they billed $700 per hour. Kellerman's eyes locked on Maya. Recognition flashed, then fury. "What is she doing here?" Whitmore answered. "Ms. Chen identified a critical deficiency in the merger contract. We're here to determine if the regulatory approval should be rescinded." "A deficiency?" Kellerman's laugh was sharp. "Found by a waitress?" "This is absurd. Careful, counselor." Whitmore's voice could freeze metal. "I don't care if she found it while washing dishes. I care if it's accurate." The Data Corps CEO, a man named Harrison, leaned forward. "We've had 3 law firms review this contract. There is no deficiency." Maya's heart hammered. But Huang placed a hand on her arm, a gesture of support that steadied her. Whitmore projected the contract on the screen. "Section 47. Ms. Chen, explain for the record." Maya stood. Her voice emerged clearer than she expected. "Section 47 addresses liability allocation. Subsection C covers pre-existing liabilities of the acquired entity. But subsection D, the contingent liability severance clause, is missing," Kellerman interrupted. "Subsection D is unnecessary. Subsection C is comprehensive." "It's not." Maya didn't look at him. She looked at Whitmore. In Whitmore versus Data Corps Industries, the court held that without explicit severance language, all contingent liabilities, including those from prior acquisitions, automatically transfer to the acquiring entity upon merger finalization. That case, Kellerman said, involved different circumstances. "No, it didn't." Maya pulled up her phone. "The precedent is clear. Page 17, paragraph 4 of your own decision. Mr. Whitmore, the absence of subsection D severance language creates automatic liability transfer, regardless of acquiring entity's knowledge or intent." Silence. Whitmore nodded slowly. "Continue, Ms. Chen." Maya's hands were steady now. She pulled up her research. "Data Corps has completed 17 acquisitions since 2015. I've identified 8 with deferred liabilities that will transfer to Apex under the current contract language." She listed them. The Tech Ventures patent settlement, the data stream environmental obligations, the pension shortfalls, the warranty claims, each one documented with SEC filings and legal precedent. Harrison's face went gray. He turned to his own lawyers. "Is this true?" One of them, a woman with sharp features, nodded slowly. "We'd need to review, but the Tech Ventures settlement does have a transfer trigger." "How much?" Harrison's voice was flat. The settlement was sealed, but estimated between $200 and $400 million is— Jesus Christ. Harrison looked at Kellerman. "You told us this merger was clean. It is clean, Kellerman insisted. These are minor. Maya's voice cut through. She wasn't afraid anymore. The environmental obligations alone are $180 million. The patent settlement could be $400 million. You're about to inherit obligations that could exceed $1.2 billion. That's not minor. That's catastrophic. Kellerman stood. You're a waitress playing lawyer. You have no standing to... She has no credentials, Whitmore interrupted. But her analysis is flawless. Which is more than I can say for yours. The room went silent. Kellerman's face turned crimson. Whitmore continued. I reviewed Miss Chen's research at 4 a.m. this morning. Every citation is accurate. Every calculation is sound. She found in 30 seconds what 3 law firms missed in 6 months. He turned to Harrison and the Apex board members. The merger, as currently structured, would violate Section 14 of the Securities Exchange Act. I'm recommending immediate suspension pending contract reformation. Harrison's voice was ice. We've spent $40 million on this acquisition. Would you rather spend $1.2 billion you didn't know about? Silence. Harrison looked at Maya, really looked at her for the first time. You're the waitress from the peninsula? Yes, sir. And you caught this because... I studied contract law at Columbia. I remembered the Whitmore case from a class I took before I had to leave school. Why did you leave? Maya hesitated. Then my mother was dying. I became her caregiver. I lost my scholarship. The room was quiet enough to hear breathing. Harrison's expression shifted. Not to pity, to something harder to name. Mr. Kellerman, Harrison said slowly, you're fired. Effective immediately. Kellerman's face drained of color. You can't, I can, and I am. You missed a $1.2 billion liability and tried to intimidate the person who caught your mistake. Harrison stood. Ms. Chen, thank you for your diligence. Send me your contact information. We'll make sure you're compensated appropriately. Whitmore cleared his throat. There's one more thing. He looked at Maya. I'm recommending Ms. Chen as an independent consultant on the contract reformation. If she prevented a $1.2 billion loss, I want her reviewing the corrected version. Maya's breath stopped. Sir, I'm not a licensed attorney, so I don't have... You have something better than credentials, Whitmore said. You have competence and integrity. That's rarer than a law degree. 2 weeks later, Maya sat in a conference room at Columbia Law School across from Dean Morrison. Between them lay a letter on university letterhead. Full scholarship reinstatement, Morrison said, including stipend for living expenses. The board approved it unanimously after they heard what you'd done. Maya stared at the letter. The words blurred. I don't understand. Patricia Huang sits on our board. She called me personally. Told me we'd lost a student we should have fought to keep. Morrison's voice softened. We have hardship provisions, Maya. We should have found a way. I'm sorry we didn't. Maya's throat tightened. I have a daughter, so I can't do full-time, part-time enrollment. Evening classes. It'll take 4 years instead of 2, but you'll finish. Morrison slid another document across the table. And this is from Kellerman's former firm. They're offering you a position as a contract analyst. Flexible hours, full benefits, salary that'll cover childcare and then some. Maya picked up the offer letter. The salary was more than she'd made in a year at the Peninsula. The title read, Senior Contract Compliance Specialist. They want me, they need you. After what happened with Apex, corporate America is terrified they've missed other deficiencies. You exposed a systemic problem. How everyone wants the waitress who saved $1 billion deal. Maya laughed, sharp and disbelieving. 3 weeks ago I was fired for speaking up. 3 weeks ago you were invisible. Now you're not. That afternoon Maya picked up Zara from school wearing jeans instead of a Peninsula uniform. Her daughter ran to her with a drawing, stick figures labeled Mama the lawyer and me the scientist. Mrs. Park told me you saved people's jobs, Zara said. Is that true? Maya knelt down, looked her daughter in the eye. I tried to. I think it worked. Because you're smart? Because I paid attention, and because I spoke up when I was scared. Zara hugged her. That's the bravest thing. They walked home through the city that had ignored Maya for 3 years. Nothing had changed except everything. The buildings were the same. The streets were the same, but Maya moved through them differently now, not as someone invisible, but as someone seen. That night, she sat at her kitchen table with the scholarship letter and the job offer. The college fund jar sat between them. She counted the money, $1,163. She added the $50,000 settlement check from Apex Capital, compensation for consulting services rendered. Maya wrote Zara's college fund on a deposit slip. In the memo line, she wrote, "For the future we're building together." Her phone buzzed. A text from Professor Reeves. "Heard you're coming back to Columbia. Welcome home, counselor. My office hours are Thursdays. I expect to see you there." Maya smiled. Home. The word felt different now. Not a place she'd lost. A place she'd earned back. 6 months later, Maya stood in front of a lecture hall at Columbia Law School. Professor Reeves had invited her as a guest speaker for his Contracts 2 class. 70 students watched her with the mixture of curiosity and skepticism that law students wore like armor. She wore emerald green, the color of growth, of visibility, of refusing to blend into the background anymore. "My name is Maya Chen," she began. 6 months ago, I was serving coffee in a conference room when I noticed a missing clause in a billion-dollar contract. I spoke up. I was laughed at, dismissed, and fired. Then I was proven right. She paused. Let the words settle. This class will teach you contract law. But I want to teach you something else. Your credentials don't determine your worth. Your courage does. Maya clicked to the next slide, Section 47 of the Apex contract, with subsection D's absence highlighted in red. The lawyers who missed this had Harvard degrees, Yale degrees, decades of experience. I had 2 years of law school and a photographic memory. But I also had something they didn't. I was paying attention. She told them about the Whitmore case, about recognizing the precedent from Reeves's lectures, about the choice to speak when silence would have been safer. Here's what I learned, Maya said. Intelligence without courage is just trivia. Knowing something is useless if you're too afraid to say it, and the world will try to convince you that your voice doesn't matter, because you don't have the right title or the right credentials or the right last name. Her voice hardened. Don't believe them. She showed them the regulatory hearing footage, showed them Marcus Kellerman's face when his mistake was exposed, showed them James Whitmore's quote, "Competence and integrity are rarer than a law degree." I'm back in law school now, Maya continued. Part-time, evening classes. It'll take me 4 years to finish what should have taken 2. But I'll finish. Because I learned something else. Brilliance doesn't have an expiration date. Dreams deferred aren't dreams denied. And sometimes the most important thing you can do is refuse to stay silent when you see something wrong. The students were quiet. A woman in the front row raised her hand. What if we're wrong? What if we speak up, and we're not as right as you were? Maya smiled. Then you're wrong, and you learn and you try again. But being wrong with courage is better than being right with silence, because silence costs lives, silence costs jobs, silence costs truth. She closed her laptop, looked at the faces watching. Her future lawyers, future power brokers, future people who would have to choose between comfort and courage. Professor Reeves taught you that contracts are promises made visible. I'm teaching you that justice is courage made audible. And sometimes the most important person in the room is the one nobody's listening to. The lecture ended. Students approached with questions. A young black woman waited until the others left. I'm pre-law, working 3 jobs. Sometimes I think I'm not smart enough to be here. Maya took her hands. You're here. That means you're smart enough. And when the time comes to speak, speak. After they left, Reeves walked her to the door. That was extraordinary. I just told them the truth. The truth is always extraordinary. He paused. Your mother would be proud. Maya's eyes burned. I hope so. I'm sure of it. You saved 3,000 jobs. You exposed systemic negligence. You proved that intelligence matters more than credentials. That's not just law, Maya, that's justice. She walked out of Columbia into the evening light. The city hummed around her, still indifferent, still enormous, still full of doors that opened and doors that stayed closed. But Maya had learned something about doors. Sometimes you didn't wait for them to open. Sometimes you knocked until they had no choice. Her phone buzzed. Zara's voice recorded, "Mama, I got an A on my math test. Mrs. Park says I'm brilliant just like you." Maya smiled. Started walking toward the subway, toward home, toward the daughter who believed her mother could do anything, toward the future she'd built from scraps and stubbornness and the simple, radical act of speaking truth to power. The woman who'd been invisible was visible now. The waitress was becoming a lawyer. The voice that had been silenced was speaking, and the world, slowly, grudgingly, one contract clause at a time, was learning to listen. Your credentials don't determine your worth. Your courage does.